All right. So audio should be on. I got less than a minute yet till we start. Do you got 7:30?
Say 7:30.
Yeah, okay. Mine says 7:30 now too. So we will go ahead and get started. I call this meeting of the Public Safety Committee to order. Roll call. Everybody is here. Supervisor Conrath is on Zoom. Affidavit of posting. Notice of this meeting was posted by the county clerk's office in accordance with all legal requirements. Let's go ahead with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. So first, consent agenda. Need a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Supervisor Thoma, second. Supervisor Milliken, any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Okay, all those in favor of approving it, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. First discussion item, duties and responsibilities of the clerk of courts. So Teresa, come on up. Morning.
Morning.
So as the clerk of court, you may or may not know that there are 72 of us in the state of Wisconsin. We are elected for 4-year terms. We are statutorily responsible for a variety of record-keeping functions of the circuit court, and that record-keeping is governed by state statutes and Wisconsin Supreme Court rules. It involves a lot of different things. Perhaps the most important function of our office is as custodian of the record. And simply put, we manage records. We create and maintain court records. We record liens and monetary judgments, and we provide access to these records. Allowing access to the records is very much a hot topic these days, not unlike what other branches of government are facing. Fulfilling those requests, which can sometimes require thousands of copies to be made, can be burdensome on the courts. However, it is an important role that we take. One area you might not automatically think about when it comes to clerks of circuit court is that we handle a variety of court finances. We collect over $1 million each year in court-ordered financial obligations, and we produce detailed financial reports on a daily, monthly, and annual basis. We also have the responsibility to manage juries. That includes selecting, notifying, and orienting potential jurors. We also ensure the safety and comfort of the jurors throughout their service. Clerks of court across the state implement court automation, providing our time, resources, and leadership on that matter. Automation is never quick, easy, or inexpensive, but it is in the public interest. Through consolidated court automation programs, you may know as CCAP, clerks of court have been provided equipment through their office with software and training that has allowed us to be more efficient and increase public access to the courts. Many of us serve on various design and policy committees that evaluate and help implement automation. Additionally, other technology advancements have helped our offices, including features such as remote access for court officials, court calendaring access, and more. In addition to handling automation, finances, record keeping, and jury management, we administer the county's court system. This includes a variety of duties. We manage the budget, trial court resources, and develop effective policies and procedures, and recruit and oversee staff. My staff clerk in court hearings. We process paperwork for criminal, family, civil, juvenile, and probate cases, and handle all of the bills and money due to the office. In the course of our work, we connect with the community. We interact with many different people and professionals on a daily basis. And we are the ones that you turn to when you have a question. challenge, or a problem involving the courts. We are also a connection and a link between the judiciary, the county boards, and the public. And at the end of the day, we have to make sure our courts run smoothly and efficiently. With that, do you have any questions?
The monies that's collected?
Yes.
Where does that go?
For the most part, we have the responsibility of holding a large amount of money in trust. So we may have bond money on file. We may have sheriff's sale money on file. Any court-ordered obligations would be reimbursement of guardian ad litem fees, and that comes back to the county because we paid the guardian ad litem or we paid an attorney out of county funds, and we're just the ordering reimbursement of those funds. So that goes back to the county. We also collect fines and forfeitures. So that money is dispersed pursuant to statute. So the jail gets $10 out of every citation. Then other money is dispersed throughout. It goes to the state treasurer's office, and then they further disperse that money. But we don't get to keep too much here. But yeah, good question.
Good. Other questions?
Supervisor Conrath does?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious, your credentials for this role, what's the skill set or the your degree to serve in the clerk of courts?
Okay, because I am an elected official, you follow the statutes on what the requirements are for running for office. But for myself, I have a bachelor's degree in business and I have an associate's degree in accounting. And I also am a certified court manager.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Yep, go ahead.
Open records requests.
Yes.
Is your office the main contact for records requests towards courts, or does that filter into your office through the county attorney's office?
So any open records request for documents from court files, that comes directly to my office.
Okay.
Yes.
Then you work with, if that's,
Whoever is requesting,
okay,
yes.
thank you.
Yes.
Other questions? I think you get off easy this morning. But thank you.
But if you have further questions as they come up, please contact me. We are the third branch of government, so, it is a little different animal than some of the other offices that you're working with. But yeah, we have a big burden, and we hope that we kind of stay under the radar, that we're just doing our job, and the judges are really
Yep.
in tune to what's going on as well. So we work well together and make this whole machine work. So,
Yep.
great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, hang on.
This is Supervisor Conrath, of course.
Yes,
I'm just curious, why did you choose to, seek this type of career for clerk of courts, and then specifically, Washington County, your current role? I always like to know the why behind people's service.
My family, we've always been one to serve communities, serve the public. I've been with the county for 33 years. I'm completing my third term right now. And I really enjoy the work. It really is fulfilling for me. And I like working with people. So I'm hoping people think the same, that I've done a good job serving them.
All right, thank you. That's priceless.
All right, thank you. Yep. All right, with that, our other discussion item is the duties and responsibilities for the Emergency Management Office. So we'll welcome up Rob, coming up here. Yep.
Morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I'm Rob Schmidt. I'm the Emergency Management Coordinator for Washington County. And just a little history on my office, and then I'll get into what we do. Every county and tribe in Wisconsin has an emergency management program, and it varies depending on size and population. Some of the northern counties have part-time people that do other things, or they just work part-time, and some of the larger counties have staffs of multiple people. So here in Washington County, my office is part of the executive's office. When I was hired in 2001, prior to that, my predecessor, it was a standalone department, and at that time they decided to consolidate it under administration in 2001, and now it's under the county exec. But I'm not quote a department head, but I do a lot of the duties of a department head. I do my budget. I attend county department head meetings. And part of the reason for that, I believe, is just so that the other department heads see me as sort of a peer, because if there ever was a time when we needed to open our emergency operations center and work on a disaster, it's not like they have to take orders from me, but they would see me as coordinating things and sort of have to, it shouldn't be the first time they meet me. So it's a good thing that Josh has let me continue doing that. So the position has many mandated duties under Chapter 323 of the law, but is given no authority to do those duties. So that's the challenge that I face every day. And I'm sure the board is used to some of those too, where you get a mandate, but you don't get any thing. But there's ways around it. So relationships are the biggest thing that I need to work on at all times. And then the office is partially funded through federal and state grants, approximately 2/3. It varies every year depending on congressional appropriations and what's going on. Sometimes there's lots of money flowing, like after 9/11 and COVID now, as we can see, although my office isn't getting any of the COVID money, but it depends on what's going on. But so because a lot of the grants fund a good portion of my office, a lot of the program things and duties that I have to do are dictated by those grants. So I sort of work for the state, well, the feds, and then that funnels through the state. And if you remember from last meeting, when the sheriff and Captain Stacer were up here talking about the Next Gen 911 and the Office of Communications under the Department of Military Affairs, that's where state emergency management also exists within the Department of Military Affairs. So just so you can see, there's sort of the relationship there. They're all kind of divisions within. Here in Washington County, the office is made up of me, who is full-time, and then I have a Kurt Rush, who's the Veteran Service Officer. 1/10 of his time is also in my budget, but his only real duties is to cover for me when I'm on vacation or sick or whatever. And actually last week I was sick, and he covered for me for an important meeting that I couldn't change. So it's a small department. I have one vehicle, which thanks to this committee is getting replaced this year. We're working on that transition now.
And I think you set the record for vehicle longevity too.
Well, close. I think the highway shop has a couple of really, really old pieces of equipment, so I can't take full credit.
But you got what, 21 years?
I think it's 17 or 18.
7, okay.
So, and it's still running. I'm using it today. So, but I am doing the transition on that now. In fact, next week, some of the cap and some of the other things are being installed on it. So, and then I also have 2 trailers that are kept in the storage building out back. One is I take out to scenes for responders to support responders, and I'll explain that a little bit later. And then the other one has supplies for sheltering folks with disabilities and things like that. And those are just used as needed. So just a quick on what emergency management is, and I wish I could say it would be quick, but it's not easy to summarize emergency management by any means, because it gets involved in a lot of subjects, and I need to know a little about a lot of things. I'm not an expert in anything, but I need to know who the experts might be, and a lot of it depends on current events. And if you just think back over the last few years, what's all been going on, I had to learn a lot about COVID over the time, and before, you know, a lot of it depends on what's going on in the world and in the country and whatever. And actually, right now, the next thing brewing is, and who would have thought of this, is they're talking about rolling brownouts now for power across the country. It's like, I've never experienced that in my almost 60 years on the earth here in the United States, but I guess that's next. So there's always something to keep me busy. And that's one of the things I really like about this job is it's not the same thing all the time by any means. There's certainly bureaucracy involved, but it's good variety. So I've never found a real good definition of emergency management, but the International Association of Emergency Managers, which is a national professional association, their definition is emergency management is the managerial function charged with creating the framework within which communities reduce vulnerability to hazards and cope with disasters. And that's not great, but it's pretty decent. And there's kind of 4 phases of emergency management that are always kind of in play. Well, not always. There's preparedness, that's always in play. That's probably what I do most of the time, is trying to get people prepared for things. Then there's a response phase, which is usually fairly short. A recovery phase, which after something happens could last from weeks to months to years. If you think about it, Katrina down in New Orleans, they're still recovering from that. So it depends on the scope of the situation. And then there's mitigation, which sort of is preparedness, but it's trying to take steps to minimize. You can't prevent natural hazards from happening, tornadoes and thunderstorms or whatever, but you can sometimes adapt things where and minimize some of the damages that can occur. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on that. But most of the people that I work with, it isn't so much the public. And much like Teresa says, my office and emergency management in general, we kind of fly under the radar and work behind the scenes. We're not out front on a lot of things. But my main, I guess you'd call them constituencies, or the people that I have to have relationships with, are certainly the 20 municipalities within the county, the cities, villages, and towns. All the county departments that might play a role when something comes up. Certainly their response agencies, law enforcement, fire departments. There's 13 fire departments in the county, and all of them do EMS except for one. And then we have one private EMS service, Lifestar. We have the sheriff's department. We have 6 full-time fire or police departments, I believe, and a couple of part-timers. And Red Cross and other groups like that I maintain relationships with. And then the other big one is public works and utilities and things like that, because like I said, on the recovery side of things, that takes a long, long time in repairing and restoring. And we'll just look what just happened down in Waukesha and in Jefferson County after that storm, and we're supposed to have more storms tonight, all the restoration of power and things like that. So I don't get involved in a lot of that, but I try to help coordinate a lot of it. So of those 4 phases, I'll just try to break it down and tell you what I do. And like I said, preparedness is probably the most, because we don't have a lot of disasters and major emergencies here. And thankfully that's good. So under preparedness, I do a lot of planning, whether it's COOP planning, which is continuity of operations. Business continuity is another way to look at that. We used that extensively when COVID hit. And if you remember, everybody was working from home, and what are the main things we need to worry about and what can kind of be put aside for the time being, that kind of thing. We have a comprehensive emergency management plan that covers the whole county. It's sort of a 30,000 foot view. It just talks in general terms about things like evacuation, sheltering, and communications, redundant systems, and things like that. It's a thick, like 600-page plan. If you ever want to see it, I'll be happy to give you a copy. And then as things come up, we do sometimes specialized plans. A good example of that, if you recall a few years ago, the oil trains that were coming through, and everyone was worried about that. We did kind of a plan on, it was more on railroad emergencies in general, but that was sort of the thrust of it. And then any types of emerging threats, like we just talked about, some of the things that just come up. I work with the health department more than I thought I would. When I started this job, I didn't think I'd health stuff, that's not really all that much. But a lot of the real world stuff that's happened here has been health. We also do exercising. I assist with a lot of that. That's like drills or practices or trying out plans, testing our plans. I facilitate a lot of training. I don't actually do it, but I'm kind of the go-between between the state or some of the federal agencies that provide training. And so agencies can request training through me, and I either write a grant for it or I, just fill out the paperwork and then make the arrangements. And sometimes I attend it as well, but a lot of times it's just to facilitate it and provide it for the different agencies that want it. Do a lot of information sharing, just pushing out information as it comes into me to the different groups that might need it. I used to be known as the grant guy. After 9/11, there was so much money flowing around and Rob could get anything anyone wanted. Well, that money has long been gone, but people still call me. But there are a few grants that besides my sustainment grants, there's a grant for the hazmat team that I do every year. That's just a perpetual grant, but then there's a lot of grants that come up, project grants or specific types of equipment that if they come through my area, I'm the one who does that, but it's usually for the benefit of the response agencies or some other agency like that. Then mitigation, which I listed, we are right now in the midst of updating our hazard mitigation plan, which covers the whole county. And you have to have a plan in place to be able to take advantage of federal mitigation grant dollars that become available either after a disaster or every year they have a certain amount of money. And again, mitigation is things like, a lot of it's flood control type things or raising properties out of the floodplain, culvert work, things like that. So the grants require a 25% match from the locals. So I haven't gotten any traction on actually any projects in the county yet, but still working on that. One of the things I'd like to see is some tornado shelters built for some of the very large manufactured home communities that we have in the county here. There's, Green Valley and Jackson is very large. There's one in Germantown. There's a bunch of them. So I'd like to see that, but it's rough getting traction with the owners because they have to donate some land and things like that, but working on things like that. So that's mitigation. And we're contracting with Sewer Pack, and that came before this body last year, I believe, the grant for that. So response, I'm on call 24/7, 365. I don't get called very often, thankfully. I usually only go to actual scenes or events if I'm asked. I don't insert myself on anything. Like I said before, I really don't have any authority to, and I don't bring much to the table, but what I do bring is I can assist the incident commanders and the people doing their thing with a lot of, I'm the conduit again, like for resources from the state, from the feds. I'm the one who has to request National Guard help and things like that. So I try to, through my relationships with the responders, show them that I have value. And some call me, some don't, and that's up to them. The couple instances where I will sort of insert myself, even if I'm not asked, is if we have to evacuate and shelter people, or if something becomes multi-jurisdictional, affecting more than one jurisdiction, because in Wisconsin with home rule, the chief elected official, whether it's a town chairman, village president, mayor, they have jurisdiction, but once it becomes multi, it gets very confusing. And that's a role that I have, is to just get those elected officials together and kind of work out the strategy. The tactics will still be done by police, fire, whoever it might be, but I work on that, and obviously the sheriff helps me with that a lot. But that hasn't happened too often, which is good. I mentioned my trailers before. I have one trailer that I have a lot of lighting, and it's more designed for extreme temperatures. Today is a perfect example. I have tents with misting fans and chairs and things, like if there was a fire, and we call it rehab, where the firefighters just need a break and get out of the sun, that kind of thing. And so that's set up kind of for that. And then The opposite would be if it's extremely cold. But since I got that trailer, we've gotten some other assets in the county, including our command post and things. So it doesn't get called for as often as it used to, but it's still available. I can also help the responders, like I said, with resources. I can reach out and reach back to the state and the feds for information for different types of specialized things. I do a lot of the documentation that has to be done during some of these events. Hazmat is one where I am a little more involved in. I respond usually to most hazmat calls because I have certain reporting and documentation duties that I have to do under law, but I also work real closely with the team. So I'm just on the list when they get called out. I almost always go, but I'll also consult with fire departments if it's something a little lower level and they're not sure, do I need to call the DNR about this or should I do this or should I do that? So I do a lot of phone consults and things like that with hazmat. Do training with them, again, facilitate a lot of it. We have an LEPC, which Supervisor Thomas just joined us. A big part of that's all regarding hazmat planning and issues. And we do a lot of what we call offsite plans. It's pre-planned for some of the 50-some facilities in the county that have chemicals. So, and those are all shared with the hazmat team as well. And then recovery. Like I said, it's the longest phase usually, and that just involves a lot of coordination with the actual workers, which would be public works or contractors, utilities. And then on the other side of that, dealing with the people affected by it. Everyone knows about FEMA. FEMA will come in and make everything okay. Well, that's really sort of a fallacy. That's a press and thing. It's a great tool. FEMA does great work, but they have limits. As every federal program, it's designed for low-income folks, and anything that's insured, don't even ask, because that would be double dipping. So in the case of our county, which we're fortunate enough to be, in a little better socioeconomic situation than some areas, they can do some things, but people are disappointed a lot in what is offered to them. So, but those types of programs also run through me as well. There's individual assistance under FEMA, and then there's what they call public assistance, which is to help governments repair infrastructure, roads and that kind of thing. And that's the more common of the two things. But again, it all runs through my office. So it's hard to summarize, but I did as well as I could. I could talk all day about this stuff. You guys don't want to listen to that. So certainly would be happy to answer questions that people might have. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is my office is located on the 3rd floor of the sheriff's office where you folks were meeting when this room was being built. I'm the only permanent inhabitant on the 3rd floor, and anytime you want to come and visit me, please do. So, but yeah, other than that, I'll answer questions.
All right, questions?
Rob, could you maybe speak about the EOC?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I suppose I should. The EOC is in that same room, the training room, the room that you met in, and the EOC stands for Emergency Operations Center. And that room can be configured into a bunch of different kind of setups. It depends on what might be the situation and depends on who kind of comes, but it's a coordination center. Again, behind the lines, I always liken it sort of to military, where the generals in the field are doing the tactics with the troops, and the generals back, way behind the lines are kind of doing the strategy. That's what we do. We try to take the load off of the folks out on the front lines. So we do things like public information, logistics, planning for the next shift, calling in mutual aid or whatever. So doing a lot of behind the scenes things, coming up with the goals and the strategy, and then sending it to the commanders for them to execute. And the EOC wouldn't really be open unless we had some sort of long-term thing that was going to be going on for many, many hours to days. But we would ask that folks come to the county if, again, it becomes a multi-jurisdictional thing. If it's just something, a good example is Hartford had a tornado in 2006. And they opened their own EOC, and there's nothing saying they can't. I'll go to someone else's EOC as well. But when it starts to become an issue where there's, I don't want to say competing, but more than one entity is sort of involved and has a place at the table, sometimes it's better to come to the county because it's more of neutral ground, if that makes sense. Is that sort of what you wanted me to?
Kind of infrastructure of what we have.
Oh, sure. Yeah, the room I have, well, we can add in lots of phone lines. What we would do is we would set up, I've envisioned it as pods and kind of functional areas where people would be working on certain aspects of things. And we can set up lots of phone lines through voice over IP. I also have 8 landlines still that I pay for because I'm old school and I don't trust the internet that's going to work forever. We have generator power up there. We have screens much like this and AV type stuff where we can monitor whether it's the media or we might have drone footage that we can watch. A lot of it's just trying to get the situational awareness because obviously we're not out there and we need to know what's going on. We have a full dispatch console up there, and if something was big enough and long-term enough, we would actually have a dispatcher up there just working that event so that our normal dispatch can still be doing the normal public safety that needs to go on. So it's a pretty well equipped and set up EOC. But I do have to say my goal, I've been here 21 years now, and my goal is to never actually open it because that means that nothing really, really major has happened. We sort of did when COVID hit the first few weeks, but because of social distancing, we all didn't gather there. We gathered in smaller groups, but we did a lot of the things that an EOC does. So I don't know, did that sort of cover it? Okay. Yeah, good. Thank you for reminding me. So any questions?
Questions?
Oh, thank you.
Do all the municipalities have their emergency, their own setup?
Good question. I wrote it down here because I failed to mention it. I think it's 15. Yes, 15 of the 20 jurisdictions have an emergency manager of their own. Most of them are part-time or wear multiple hats. Sometimes they're the police chief or the fire chief. But I always encourage that because one of the things I do is I always try to go out, especially after elections when there's new chief elected officials, and I don't try to scare them, but I tell them, and it's the fact that if something happens in your jurisdiction and you don't have an emergency manager, I'm calling you, because there's only me. I can't be in a bunch of different places doing some of the things, because especially early on, you have to do a lot of like damage assessment and kind of just getting your arms around what exactly has happened. So in many cases, they've decided to delegate that to, to someone. But so most, 3/4 have an emergency manager. The ones that don't are all towns. And I think they're just hoping that I will, I'll help them as much as I can, but I can't always be just doing theirs things. But the larger, I would say, I think all of the villages and cities have an EOC or at least a designated area for it. Some are like Jackson and Hartford and Richfield, who just built fairly new, Hartford remodeled, but Richfield and Jackson just built beautiful new fire stations, and Jackson, the whole municipal police and government. And they have beautiful, almost nicer than the county now, EOCs, just because they're new and they put it into their plans. But many of them have at least a designated area where that would go on. So, and I certainly, all disasters are local, so they're always going to start there, and maybe an EOC would be open, like say, let's just take Germantown for an example, but then if the situation expands and gets bigger and bigger and bigger, we might ask them to then come and start working out of hours.
Okay, I think Supervisor Conrath had a question.
Yes, thank you. What does your relationship look like with those community emergency management officers and also the hospital systems? Do you do you all have an annual meeting together or maybe biannual meetings or, what does that relationship look like between, the county, your role, and then the community and the hospital system, emergency management systems? Because I'm aware you have your same role with being a nurse.
Sure, yeah, it's a good question. On the emergency management side, the local emergency managers, I meet with them at least once a year. Usually it's about this time in spring because we go over the damage assessment situations because like tonight we have the possibility for bad weather again and it always changes as the federal government goes. But health is another area which I didn't mention, but certainly dialed in with all the health systems and EMS. And the way we keep in touch, a couple of different ways. I go to lots of meetings, and one of them is the Washington County Healthcare Partners, which is all the medical systems. It's run by the health department, but I'm there. All the different health systems. Red Cross has a medical arm. I'm trying to think, there's a few other people, but it's a good group of, that shares information and talks about things. There's also the PERC, which is the Hospital Emergency Response Coalition. That's kind of all of southeastern Wisconsin. They have meetings, I believe, every other month, and I attend those as much as possible. They've been virtual lately. And then we also have an EMS committee, which is a subgroup of the Washington County Fire Chiefs, and the hospitals in our county also attend that. In fact, tomorrow night we have an EMS meeting. So I'm pretty dialed in with that. Oh, and then the other thing is both Freighter and Aurora have, their systems have emergency managers actually that work for the systems. And we talk and coordinate on a regular basis too. And I'm sure they do that for all the counties that they're in.
Mm-hmm. Right. Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead.
So part of your job is just remembering acronyms, if I'm understanding.
Yes, it is.
In the big 30,000 foot view document, I forget what you called it.
CEMP.
Yep.
CEMP.
Another acronym.
Yeah.
What's the biggest disaster that plan calls? Like, do you try to plan for, or are we talking nuclear fallout or?
Yeah, I mean, those.
How far are we dreaming out?
Yeah.
You can plan for anything, but.
Right, and that's why it's sort of just a vague overview, because if, your imagination could run wild and you'd have thousands.
It's been running wild.
Yeah. I have to say that the nuclear thing has come back sort of from, not quite to the level it was in the 50s and 60s, but it's, dirty bombs and things like that are a little bit more, we have what we call an annex, which is sort of a subchapter, an appendix to some of the sections of the CEMP, and that talks about the effects of a nuclear detonation or a radiological dispersal device is what the term for a dirty bomb. But it's written by the experts, and either at the federal level or at the state. And I just know who to call for something like that. We have, I would say we're not super set up for that. I don't know if anybody really is, but Hazmat has some dosimeters and some radiation detectors. Each fire department has one radiation detector. Because more than anything, your most common thing, believe it or not, FedEx and UPS ship more radioactive material than anybody. And if you come up on an accident on a UPS truck on the freeway, I always, just tell them, hey, just do a quick survey because you can't see it or sense it in any way. So, so a little bit, but I also know who to call. If we had any sort of radioactive issue, we would be calling the experts. The state has a whole response team that will come, and as do the feds. And we're fortunate in that one of the national labs, I can't think of which one it is, but is located in the Chicago area, so they could be up here fairly quickly for things like that. But back to your other question, certainly that's a major issue. But I think the thing that makes me the most nervous of anything is, and it could be from many, many different causes, is just the loss of power long term. everything relies on power. So if it's off for a long time, depending on the, in the heat, it's really bad. In the cold, it would be even worse because sooner or later you wouldn't have, other infrastructure cascades down. You can't even flow natural gas without electricity for the pumps that, send it to the homes. So that makes me extremely nervous is, a long-term power outage where we would be kind of going back to the days before there was electricity. And I don't think Americans would react real well to that. So that makes me nervous. I don't have answers for all of it, certainly. We have we're actually working right now, and this was prior to this whole brownout stuff, but it was after Hurricane Sandy, I believe, out on the East Coast and the Colonial Pipeline. The chaos that went on with people wanting gas. And so we're working on a fuel plan for the county residents. We already have a fuel plan for the essential workers, the responders and the utilities and things like that. We've got backup power on our pumps and there's a couple other places. We've worked with E.H. Wolf and Slinger that has a pretty large stockpile of fuel. But now we're trying to work with some of the gas stations and things to be able to provide fuel to the general public on generator power and things like that. But it's a little more complicated when you're working with, the private sector, but we're working on it. It wouldn't be every station open, obviously, but we'd have designated ones. And then there'd be things like what they did out east, I believe, was either your license plate, like the last digit in your license plate, even or odd, that would be the day you could do it. But those are some of the things that keep me up at night, that kind of thing. So yeah, that and cyber, which is so far over my head, but again, other people know about it, and we're very fortunate. We have Joel Wappert from that works for IT here, is also a member of the state cyber response team, which is based in the National Guard, but they have some government IT workers as well. So that's great. He seems to know a lot about it, and again, I would defer to him. But cyber can screw up, just like electricity. A lot of things things just won't work. We're used to. So,
Okay.
does that answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions? Looks like we're all good on questions. Oh, we got one more coming in at the last minute here. So Supervisor Conrad?
No, sorry, just like I asked previously to, or asked all people, just curious about your background and also the why behind you chose to serve in the role that you do and for the county.
Well, I started here in 2001, and prior to that, I worked in the private sector and had never worked for government before. But the company I worked for had gone out of business, and I literally saw this ad in the paper, and I had been a volunteer firefighter for, at that time, about 12 years. And so I applied for this job. I was one of many, I guess, and was fortunate enough to get it. I think it was the background of my business background and my fire department background that got me hired, I guess. And that's how I kind of fell into it, but I really enjoy it and I like it. I didn't think I'd need to know as many acronyms as I learned. It's something that I thought was on the horizon, certainly, but
If you're connected to there's acronyms.
I'm sorry, what?
Any connection to healthcare, there's a lot of acronyms.
Yes, yeah, but I like it, and I do like, I like serving and helping people as well. I sort of like to do it, like I said, sort of under the radar, but that's fine. But yeah, I guess that's the best I can answer on that one. I don't have it. Yeah, I guess one thing I would say though is emergency management is kind of a growing field right now. There hasn't really been any education. There is now, but when I started at least, there really wasn't any formal education programs for EM, but now there are quite a few. Because EM has expanded into the private sector quite a bit as well. And I think now, like if you tried to get in as a young person, having a degree, but also having some experience is probably, you need a combination of the two for that. But when I started, it was more, I think it was more my responder background that really helped.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Yep. All right, I think we're good with emergency management. Our next meeting is July 20th at 7:30 a.m. And I will call this meeting adjourned. All right, thanks, everyone.